Oh, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. The first political act in my life that, at least as far as I can recall, was when I was a junior in high school, and I was reading the evening newspaper in Portland, and it reported that Vice President Spiro Agnew had been convicted of accepting bribes, and while this memory is decades old, so I may not have the numbers quite right, it was something like he accepted $100,000 in bribes, and his penalty for his criminal conviction was a $10,000 fine. And I sat down and wrote a letter to the newspaper, the Oregon Journal, and said, how can anyone believe that there's justice, that if you take $100,000, you only get charged 10% of it? How is that possibly justice? And I find myself asking exactly the same question in this situation. I believe it was the day after the announcement that HSBC had essentially been caught laundering billions of dollars in funds. There was a story about a woman who, her boyfriend had stored, I believe, a suitcase or a coffee can with his drug money in her upstairs or her attic or something like that. And she was doing something like 10 years in prison for having that tangential connection to the flow of this illegal money. So if an individual gets 10 years in prison, can you explain, each of you, how you would explain to an ordinary citizen in America that a company which launders billions of dollars tied to criminal syndicates that in northern Mexico 40,000 people have died? I don't know about the terrorist side of this, but the drug side is pretty well documented. How do we explain that that is a system of justice in the United States of America? Mr. Cohen.
Senator Merkley, as I'm sure you know, it's the Justice Department that determines...
I understand. I'm asking you your opinion. How would you explain it to your neighbor asking you, saying you're a high official in the U.S. government, this is the decision our government made, what would be your personal sense of it?
So what I would tell my neighbor is, first of all, the agencies within my area of responsibility took action in this circumstance in an extraordinarily aggressive way and in a powerful way and beyond anything we'd ever done previously. With respect to the Justice Department, we, of course, we're working on this investigation with the Justice Department, but at the end of the day, it is the Justice Department's sole prerogative to determine who to prosecute, when to prosecute, and what to charge. And
so let me interrupt for a minute. If a member, while you're working with them on this, a member of the Justice Department says, David, what's your opinion? Should we prosecute?
No.
Your response would be?
Well, Senator, I think it depends whether you're asking me, personally asking me as the Undersecretary. And it also depends on what the it is, whether we're talking about prosecuting an individual, prosecuting an institution, what the charges may be. These are all issues that...
So you say to the Justice Department, you say, well, I'm working very closely with you. I want to know what if, should we do individuals or should we do the corporation? And he says, I'd like to know your opinion on both.
Yeah.
And so then you say, my opinion on the individuals is X, and my opinion on the corporation is Y, and your opinion is?
So let me say, my role in the Treasury Department, and I think the Treasury Department more broadly, our role is to execute.
No, I understand that, but that wasn't my question. But you're welcome to simply say, I don't feel it's appropriate for me to answer your question. That would be better than just pretending not to answer it.
No, I was trying to answer your question. But it's not our role to advise the Justice Department on how to exercise their prosecutorial discretion.
Thank you. Mr. Curry?
Perhaps it might be helpful, Senator, to explain how we arrived at the penalty that we imposed at the OCC, the $500 million penalty.
I'm pretty familiar with that.
No, but I
that's
think
not the heart of my question.
It reflects what we're trying to do as from a civil enforcement standpoint to make sure that they.
Okay, I don't want to recite history I'm already familiar with. Let me ask the question differently. Do we have a situation where banks have become so large that, in the words of Attorney General Holder, if you prosecute them, quote, it will have a negative impact on the economy and the financial system at large, unquote? And does that mean essentially we have a prosecution-free zone for large banks in America?
It's my view that no bank is above the law, as Governor Powell stated earlier. If, in a particular case, the Justice Department met the requirements of the statute, that there was a criminal conviction for any money laundering violations, I would start the process under the National Bank Act to consider revoking.
And I appreciate that. And I realize that's where your responsibility comes in, and it comes in after the prosecution and the conviction.
We wouldn't hesitate to start that process.
Thank you. And Governor Powell, does this create a fundamental concern about a fair system of justice across America?
Yes, it does. It's absolutely fundamental that we're all equal before the law. And that's why we're all committed to ending too big to fail. And in the first instance, Congress has passed Dodd-Frank. The agencies are vigorously implementing Title I and Title II and carrying out the plan that you've given us, really, led by the FDIC, but we're all involved, to eliminate too big to fail. And I think that's been well done. The question in the end is it enough? And I think we'll know the answer to that in the relatively near future. It's not a game plan that can be implemented overnight, but until we finish that, I couldn't look this guy in the eye. You asked me to explain to him how it's fair. I can't do it.
Thank you for that very direct answer.